Hi, this is Matt, and you're listening to Bluegrass Jam Along, the podcast for anyone and everyone who loves bluegrass. Hey everybody, welcome back. This is your Bluegrass Briefing for 26th of February 2024. Weekly news and reviews and updates and general bits and pieces about the world of bluegrass and string band music and all the adjacent bits and pieces. Welcome to all the new people listening this week. If this is your first briefing, welcome. It's good to have you here. What we generally do is kick off with a little bit of news about what's going on Bluegrass Jam Along. Last episode that came out was an interview with George Jackson about the Old Time 100 project that he did with Tristan Scroggins. Talking about old time and bluegrass, what's the same, what's different, but most importantly, talking about why they recorded 100 fiddle tunes in a day. How that worked, how it was, what they learned, what the point of it was in terms of being educational, so anybody listening can learn some stuff. Just really interesting interview. I really enjoyed talking to George. Fascinating. Really enjoyed that one. And this week's episode coming up also has a Tristan Scroggins connection because Tristan plays mandolin with Missy Raines. And this week's interview is with Missy. Really, really enjoyed this one. I didn't know Missy. I hadn't spoken to her before. I basically got the album and a little bit of press stuff that goes with it. Had a listen, really enjoyed it, and just really enjoyed the sort of context and conversation and story behind it. And you'll find out a bit more when the interview comes out on Wednesday. But I really enjoyed it. It was a really thoughtful, interesting conversation. And I just had, a lot of fun talking to Missy. That was great. So, very much looking forward to putting that one out. Some more cool stuff lined up coming over the next few weeks, which I'll tell you a bit more about when we get there. But that's basically what's been going on the podcast this week. Next up is Church Street News, which is news and announcements. And the first thing, just wanted to mention the passing of Ronnie Stoneman, banjo player, daughter of Ernest Pop Stoneman. As always with things like this, I think the thing that is great is seeing the outpouring of affection and respect and sort of celebration of everything that Ronnie achieved, and that was great to see. It's a sad moment, of course, but it's good to see the celebration that goes alongside that. And I just wanted to sort of mark that and take a moment to mention that. But the main bit of news beyond that, we've got two things really. We've got one, which is Casey Dreesen's Blue Ridge Fiddle Camp, which is happening in August this year. And like the banjo camp that Baylor runs and the guitar camp that Bryan Sutton runs, chance for fiddlers to get together, learn from some amazing instructors, including Casey, of course. Also Tatiana Hargraves, who I saw here with Transatlantic Sessions a couple of weeks ago. Fantastic fiddle player. Really, really cool. And also Darryl Langer will be there, amongst many other people. There's a lot going on there. But Blue Ridge Fiddle Camp in August. Check that out. I'll put a link in the show notes. And the other thing is something called Song Farmers, which is an international community of musicians and artists. They're hosting their 8th annual gathering, my teeth stuck there, in Renfrew Valley, Kentucky, at the Kentucky Music Hall of Fame in May, 17th and 18th. And it's something that's created by Michael Jonathan, who I know, and I'm sure a lot of you know, as sort of folk singer, but also the host of Woodsong's Old Time Radio Hour. Some of the music I've discovered and absolutely loved has come from watching Woodsongs. When I first started getting into this music, just listening to some of those, and I think that's where I first heard Mike Marshall and Chris Thiele play tracks from Into the Cauldron, and such a cool thing in its own right. But there's this thing called Song Farmers, and it's an international community of musicians and artists. And Michael Jonathan says the music business has changed and left thousands of passionate, motivated, talented musicians and songwriters in an artistic void. What can they do with their skills in a music world that doesn't buy CDs anymore? And as part of all this, there's a lot of information that goes with that. I'll put a link in the show notes. But they're doing this event to sort of highlight what they do. There's all these communities around the world, and it's about encouraging music, I guess, for the sake of music. But there's so much more to it than that. And I will send you to the website to have a look at that, because I think it will explain it much better than I can. But it sounds like a really cool thing. And it's happening May the 17th and 18th. And I think just go check that out. It's really cool. And that is it for Church Street News this week. Which brings us on to The Grass is New, and a couple of singles this week we've got. First is a new band called Ezra, and their single Banjalina, which is off their album which is due out on March the 1st. And this is a band made up of Jesse Jones, Jacob Jolliffe, Max Allard and Craig Butterfield. Acoustic, experimental, instrumental, all sorts going on. I've had a quick listen, and what I like, what I've heard so far I really like, but I've put their single Banjalina in the playlist. And I've got a copy of the rest of the album, and I'm really looking forward to digging into that. I very much like what I've heard so far. So do go and check that out. And also there's another single from Ethan Sherman's record, Passages, which is due, I think, on March the 8th. This single called Lake Air, another acoustic instrumental stuff. Looking forward to chatting to Ethan about that. I'm talking to him, I think, this week coming, about Passages, about the record itself, but also about a book called String Theories that he's co-written. So very much looking forward to talking to Ethan. But those two tracks are in the playlist now. Banjalina by Ezra and Lake Air by Ethan Sherman. And if you don't know much about this podcast or you're new, then what I mean is there's a playlist called The Grass is Mostly New, which is on Spotify. There's a link in the show notes. Every time something new comes out that I mention here, I'll stick it in the playlist. And it just over the year builds up an interesting playlist of new stuff you can go and check out. And I occasionally chuck in something older that's cropped up or I've listened to as well. So do go and check that out. There's one for last year up there as well, with a load of cool releases from last year that you might have missed. But yes, that's what I mean by the playlist. And that is us for The Grass is New this week. And so the next bit is called Scroll On Buddy, and this is where I just highlight something I've seen on social media that I found interesting and thought you might. And it's a Facebook post by Scott Nygaard. Scott's a great guitar player, also founder of Peghead Nation, but he played on so much stuff, some of the early Chris Thile stuff, so many of those sort of wonderful Tim O'Brien records, and some great records in his own right and all sorts of stuff. But he put something on Facebook just talking about how important he sees it as being, as playing for people to dance to, and ties in with some of the stuff I talked to George Jackson about on the podcasts last week. We're talking about the difference between bluegrass and old time, or one of the differences, and that old time music was for dancing to, and bluegrass, potentially, as the radio came along and records music became a little bit more about entertainment rather than just to dance to, and then changed some things. But there's a fascinating thing that Scott Nygaard talks about playing for people to dance to. And it's really interesting because he is one of those players that has gone down that route and has kind of got a wonderful groove as a result. And it makes me think of Russ Barenberg, very much the same. He played for a lot of contra dance stuff as part of his career, and it's a really interesting conversation about the way the groove is different if you are playing for people to dance to rather than just to listen to. I'll put a link to that so you can go and actually read what Scott says rather than me sort of slightly paraphrase it. But it was really interesting, and I think it ties in really nicely with the George Jackson episode from last week. So if you haven't listened to that, go and listen to that as well. Because I think rhythm and groove were a really interesting part of the mix, and there's a lot to talk about in there. But yeah, so I'll put a link to the post. Do go and check it out. It's really interesting sort of just, I guess, a conversation that can carry on, but it's a good starting point to think about. But that's it for Scroll On Buddy. And so the last bit is just the In My Ears this week bit, and I've been listening to all sorts this week. But one thing I've been listening to in particular is the first David Grisman Quintet record, which took me a while to find because it's not on any of the streaming services in the UK. Can't buy it on a CD. It doesn't appear to be anywhere on David Grisman's acoustic disc site to download. I could not find it. And thank you to Alistair McCubbin, who helped me get hold of a copy. And it is wonderful. I've been listening to it the last couple of days, really enjoying it. And it's, for me, there's a whole thing which might turn into a bit of a project at some point, either for the podcast or something else, but just really interested in the history of acoustic string band instrumental music over the past 50 years, and that feels like a really key point for all that. So it's great to get to listen to that record properly, so thank you, Alistair. And if you haven't heard it and you can get it, I think in the States it is on things like Spotify, do go and have a listen. It's the first David Grisman Quintet record, before Hot Dog and all of that. Very, very cool. But that's it for this week. That is your Bluegrass Briefing. As always, bluegrassjamalong.com. Jam Along tracks, interviews, chord charts, mailing lists, all sorts. Do go and have a look. There's loads of stuff on there. There's 360 something episodes now, all on the website. You can stream them all on the website. You can speed up and slow down the backing tracks. You can search stuff, find the interviews you want, find the backing tracks you want. There's also links to go and listen on Google, Spotify, YouTube, all of that. I think all the episodes are on YouTube as well now. That's where you get your stuff. But that is it for this week. Don't forget to check back on Wednesday and listen to the Missy Raines interview. Very much looking forward to putting it out. But in the meantime, have a fantastic week. I will see you soon, and happy picking. Bluegrass Jam Along is proud to be sponsored by Collings Guitars and Mandolins, making some of the finest guitars and mandolins in the world since the 1970s. Visit collingsguitars.com and find out why.